Hey, there we go. Sorry, I had a bit of lag there. Hey everyone, thanks for the intro, Jamie. Appreciate it. Like you said, my name's Hugh. I work for Automatic, where I'm sponsored full-time to work on the WordPress open source project as a community manager. I work with a great team there, and it's a lot of fun, really. I get to work on open source every day and with community, which is great. Hello, everyone. Andrea, Laura, Matt, everyone else in the chat there. I'm from Cape Town in South Africa, so this is later in the day for me. It's evening now, and it's a good time to be talking to you, so I'm very happy to be here. Today I'm going to be talking about defining a identity for your community members, or membership identity for your community, really. It's an interesting topic. It's something that I'm very keen on, very interested in. It's very important. It's having a sort of defined membership identity for your community allows you to focus on who you're going to be reaching with your community and who you're going to be serving the most and be most effective in the way you serve them. So kind of bear that in mind when we're talking about all of this stuff. That's sort of what we're looking at. If you say your community is just for everyone to join and it's for everyone and anyone can be a part of it, you sort of miss out on creating that really deep value for a set of people who will find that most value from your group, which is from your community, which is really what we're all here to do as community builders, is provide that kind of value for people. Thanks. It's not quite Freedom Day. It's the day after Freedom Day, but thank you from Jessica who said that. And yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about. During the workshop, I've got a little worksheet I'm going to share. It's a Google Doc that you can copy and work on your own for you to do if you are interested in kind of working along with it, which I think would be very valuable. It would be great if you could do that. Maybe even share some of your feedback in the chat, and we can talk about it. We can include it in what we're discussing here. If you do that, and also if you share it, it'll help all of us learn from each other, which would be fantastic. So just a heads up that'll be coming a bit later. I'll drop the link in the Slack when that comes up. I'm just going to share my screen here quickly, or my slides here with you, so you can get that. There we go. Does that look okay for everyone? Yeah, cool. So yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be talking about this with all of you. So to get started with what we're talking about, I'm just arranging stuff in my thing. Sorry, so I don't lose my place. There we go. To get started with what we're talking about, I want to look at what is a community membership identity, because that is pretty important for all of this. If we don't know what we're talking about, it becomes pretty difficult to make any decisions about it. So community membership identity is essentially what you are expecting of your community members, what kind of things you expect them to enjoy, believe, take part in while they're a part of your community. We're going to be looking at a few specific things within that. So just to sort of kind of go over the three main areas of what we're looking at there. Your community membership identity answers three questions. It tells people, who am I in the context of your community? Because obviously your community is for a specific area of people's lives. You're not trying to take over someone's entire life, but you're saying, who am I within the context of this community? Saying, how should I act within this community, within the context of this group? And also, what do I believe as it pertains to this community? So it's who am I, how should I act, and what do I believe, all within the context of the community that you're in. And that's really what a community membership identity is all about, and what we're looking at defining today. Because if you can define these three things for your community, it'll be much easier for you to reach people and to create far more value for your members. So the first thing we want to look at before we answer those three questions, the first thing we need to sort of do up front is answer the question, what does my community value? And I'm going to be looking at this from the perspective of the WordPress community, because that's my experience, that's where I'm working, and that's where I come from, and that's where the community I'm the most familiar with. So this could be different for everyone. So to give some examples of what I mean here, when I say what is my community value, what I'm talking about is just keywords of things your community values. So in the case of WordPress, it would be the idea of being able to share your ideas, being able to, it's an open source community, and open source means that people can contribute back to it. So open source is an important value there. With WordPress, inclusivity, accessibility, all of that are incredibly valuable things to the community as a whole. And those are really the things we value as a community. That list could go on for a very long time, and whatever your community is, you can define those values for yourself. Like if you are a community of like a fitness community, CrossFit or something like that, where they've got a very tight-knit community, your values would be things like keeping fit, looking after your body, being healthy, working out together, that sort of thing. So it all depends on what your focus is as a community, what you value there. I'm just going to grab the link for the worksheet here, so I can drop it in the chat. And here you go. I'm going to drop this here. You guys can open this up. It's a Google Doc, should be open to everyone, and you can make a copy of that for yourself and fill in yourself. You see there's a box there for name of your community, what your community values, and then to answer the 3 questions. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about and going through today. If you would like to share your once you made a copy, share your ones back. There's a comment there. You can reply to that comment with a link to yours, or you can just share it in the chat here. That'd be great. I would love to see those. I'd love to see this kind of thing from people. So I would I'd find that incredibly valuable, and we could all learn from each other, and we could all even help each other. So there's the link. Have a look at that. And then, I think once we've defined what we value as a community, we can move on to what those three questions really are, and that's the most important thing here, really, that we're talking about. So I'm going to cover those and see what we can do about those, and see what we can learn from each other. So let's get started. That's a short link to the worksheets, but you've got it already. I will put these slides and just worksheets and stuff all up probably on my blog, which there'll be a link at the end. I'll do that tomorrow. So if you follow me on there, you can get hold of that. If you want to see any of these kind of things, I'll maybe post some more information about it as well, so you can elaborate a bit more. So the first question is, who does my community, who does your community rather tell members that they are? Now that could be anything. It could be, take the fitness community for example. Again, you could tell people, you could be telling your members that you are a valuable person who deserves to be healthy and to be fit and to look after your body. And you can, by the way, the worksheet, if you want to get hold of it, click in the top corner, because I see people highlighting stuff in the top corner, click File, and then make a copy, and it'll copy it to your Google account, and you can get your own copy of it. I see someone's already done and dropped theirs in there, so thanks for that. So the fitness community, for example, your value what you tell people you are. You tell people you're a valuable human being who deserves to be healthy and fit and to develop their physical body in a way that benefits them, for example. I like the mentor hub community that Jessica Silverman looks like is linked in there. That looks great. And it's saying the members are members of the mentor family or their partners, and it's clearly someone committed to closing the mental gap in the USA, which is fantastic. I like that kind of thing. I like seeing what you guys are working on as well, which is really, really cool. I'm going to give an example from the community that I work in, because it's obviously what I'm most familiar with. So the WordPress community kind of has two sides to it. There's people who work with WordPress, the users, people who write for a blog or for a website or whatever it is, and they publish their content and they publish their information. And the other side of the community is people who contribute back to the project itself. Like I said, it's an open source project, so people can contribute to it. So when I talk about the community for WordPress, those are sort of two sides to it. So example I've got here has sort of two aspects to it. The first is the sort of user, reader, user, blogger, writer sort of aspect, and a community identity statement there for who am I would be I am a unique individual with something important to say. My thoughts and my ideas are valuable. So that defines what people should, how people should view themselves within the context of that community, and it defines sort of and it helps lead on to how they should act and what they should believe, which are the next few questions. And the other side of the community is the open source contribution side of it. And for that, the statement I've got there is I have useful skills that I can use to make impactful contributions to the broader community. And that's really what open source is all about, having these skills that you share with the broader community. I can feel myself wanting to go and talk about open source all the time now, because I could do that for a very long time, and my colleagues will know that. But I won't tonight, don't worry. But that's really, that's really what we're saying people are when they come to the WordPress community to contribute. I have useful skills that I can use to make impactful contributions to the broader community. And that's what we find very important. So that's kind of the first question. I really enjoy seeing what other people fill in for these kind of things, because I feel like it's very interesting to see how other people view their communities. And I think it's very valuable to learn from other people in that sense. I see some people typing things in the document there, which is great. You can all type in there. It's all good. Everyone's different things should be highlighted in different colors if you do, so that's fine. So someone mentioned architects as a community there. I think that's great. Architects interested in sustainable, and sensitivity to our environment. I assume you're going with that. I think that's very cool. It's nice to see so many different types of communities represented here. Yeah, so that's the first question. Who am I? Who does your community tell members that they are? And that's incredibly valuable. Once you know who you are, you know how you should act, and you know what you should believe. And then you can go forward from there. If anyone else wants to share their stuff they're writing or their docs in a comment on that doc, that'd be great. We could open up and have a look at that as well. I'm very happy to sort of talk through some of that, and we can sort of collaboratively talk through it together, because that is always a lot of fun. Someone else shared theirs. Let's see. So yeah, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, that's what in the chat here. Thanks, Kathy. And when you say who am I, it's people with asthma and allergies who want to come together for support and tips. Very straightforward, very, very clear, which is good. I like that. I like that it's clear and open and easy to understand. And it defines exactly who you're expecting to be a part of your community. That's great. Cool. Let's move on to the second question. What does your community tell members they should do? Once again, this is only within the context of the community itself. You're not telling people what they should do with their entire lives. You're telling them what they should do within the context of your community when they are part of it and when they are taking part. To go back to the fitness example, that could be something like members of my community, our community should work to improve their fitness and to improve their physique and improve their physical and mental health, for example. It could be, like I said, it could be anything relevant to your community. I see for the Mentor Hub community that's going on one of the docs here, how I should act is they should share expertise, they should be vulnerable, ask questions, treat questions respectfully, and connect with colleagues personally as well as professionally. Mentor Hub sounds fantastic, by the way. I like that. So that's really that's how people are expected to act within that community, and I think that's a fantastic sort of expectation and vision. It also, you'll find what your answers to these questions do, instead of just, or more rather than just providing you with a nice sort of thing about how you can explain what you do. They also help you define what your community is all about. They help you define exactly who you're targeting with your community if you haven't already got that clear. So this has a lot of kind of knock-on effects in that sense. So going back to my example in the WordPress community, as it's what I'm most familiar with, the first side of it, the sort of user, writer, blogger side of it, is in terms of what does your community tell members they should do. So I share my ideas and publish content that I care about. It's very simple. These don't have to be fancy statements. They're very, very straightforward, very easy to understand. And on the other side of it, the open source contributor side of things, when I can, I volunteer my time to contribute back to the community, helping others to do the same. So there's an element of mentorship there, which is great, and working with other people to collaboratively to help them be a part of things. That's just, yeah, that's one of the ways you can do that. I see one of the things in here for the Sustainable Architects community is design with sensitivity to our environment and biosystems. That's cool. That explains things quite nicely, how you expect people to act within the community. That's an incredibly valuable way of explaining that. Yeah, so you'll see, like I said, these things don't have to be very fancy statements. They can be very simple, just stating who you are, stating what you believe, stating what you do. Even if it seems really obvious to you, it might not be obvious to people coming to your community for the first time. Or even if they've been in your community for a while, this would really help them understand what they're doing there and what value they can get from it, and also what value they can give back to the community. Because if people understand what your community is all about in this sense, like how they should act within the community, they can give back to the community far more effectively and help you to grow it, which is incredibly valuable for you and for your community and for all of your members. The Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America one that was linked in the chat there, and how I should act, take control of the asthma and allergy treatment to live their best life. And I think this is incredibly important. Share those experiences with others. You'll find that's in terms of that kind of last sentence there, that sharing your experience with others, that's very similar to what I had put in the WordPress contribution side of things. And like I said, that is such a valuable part of building community, is getting people within the community to get involved in building the community further. So you might be a community manager or community builder, or the person who's kind of got this group going, whether it's a small group or even a big group that you're managing, whatever it is. But defining these things so that people within the community can get involved in pushing that mission forward and pushing that community forward is incredibly useful and incredibly important. So that's great. I like seeing those kind of things included in there. If anyone else wants to share their things, drop them in the chat or in the link, and I will open them up and share them. And I'm happy to give feedback on those things as well. Yeah, I think that's great. I'm just reading some of the other things people have put in here. Cool. I see there's some stuff. I can't see what this community is for. Is it POVNet online community, I think? Community members value access to justice, systems change, and reducing negative impacts of issues related to poverty. So it's a social justice community. And in terms of who am I, the community tells members that they are not alone in their challenging work and their questions are valid, and their knowledge and experience can help others. That's fantastic. That's a fantastic mission statement for your community, and an excellent way to show people how they can engage. It's all very cool. I'm enjoying seeing everyone's writing going on there. It's really great seeing all of that. And then on to the third question. What does your community tell members they should believe? And once again, I just want to repeat this because it is very important. This is about what they believe in the context of your community. It's not what they believe about their whole lives. You're not defining a faith system for them or anything like that. You're telling them what they should believe within the context of your community and when they are part of your community and when they're interacting with your community. So yeah, it could be anything depending on what you're looking at. Looking at the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America community, it says the asthma and allergies are a challenge, but they do not define you. You have control over that. I think that's fantastic. I think that's it's a really empowering statement, which is great. So yeah, I think that's great. I think one thing that's really valuable in these statements is if you make them much like that one, I feel very sort of aspirational in nature. So people might join your community and they don't immediately believe that they have control over that, but it's something they can aspire to and work towards as they grow within their community, which is very, very cool. Looking at the Mentor Hub one that's been filled out here. What do I believe? All young people and communities deserve quality mentoring. We are servant leaders to our community. We value diversity, equity, and inclusion. We can always improve our work, and we care about each other. That's a few different statements, and all of those are great statements. I really like that those are things you value in your community, and those are things that you would push people to believe. Because like I said, these are aspirational things. People might sort of believe these at a base level, but a lot of these things, to really have these beliefs impact your life, it can take a while for people to build up to that. So having these sort of aspirational belief statements is really valuable and really, really helpful. And then I'm going to see if there's anyone else who filled out stuff in here. For the ecological architects community, sorry, I didn't catch the name of the community, I apologize, but that seems to be a decent description of it. What do I believe? I believe we as designers and architects should be responsible to create a philosophy for ecological architecture and then apply it. I think that's great. That really defines exactly what you're expecting of people, defines what you expect people to believe within the context of community. All of these are really, really good, because as you can see, they're not just sort of like telling people what they should believe about life and how they should now define their lives based on this new belief that they have. But they should be working towards these beliefs, so aspirational in nature. So going to my example in the WordPress community, on the one side, on the user, blogger, writer side of things, I believe my ideas are valuable and it's worth taking the time to publish them. That is something that, like I said, is incredibly aspirational for a lot of people. That's not something people immediately think. You might start a blog and start writing stuff. You might not think that your ideas are super valuable. You're just writing because you enjoy writing, or you feel like it would be a good thing to do. But if you can get to a point where you believe that your ideas are valuable and it's worth taking the time to publish them, you can really make a huge impact with your writing. And that's really what the WordPress community is all about, in terms of people using it as a product to get their word out there. One of the, motto, I guess you could say is probably the right word, for the WordPress project is democratizing publishing, which is making publishing available to all. And that's really what that sort of aspirational belief is all about. The other side of that, of the WordPress community, the open source contributor side of things, I believe in the freedom that open source provides and that I can take part in, and that I can take part in sharing that freedom with others. Once again, this gets onto open source, which I could talk to you about all day, but I won't. It's believing in the freedom that open source provides and believing that you can take part in sharing that freedom with others. Once again, very aspirational. This is something that we want contributors to really believe about themselves and about the project, even if they don't necessarily come into it believing that. We're hoping really that they'll grow to believe that. So as you can see, these things that we're looking at in terms of what we believe are they're not necessarily defined for everyone immediately. People work towards them, and that's incredibly important to note, because you don't want people to start in your community, see this thing and see, oh, I think like that now. I don't even belong here. What am I doing here? I don't really believe that my ideas are valuable. My ideas aren't really worth much, something like that. And then they think, oh, I'm not part of it. It's important to understand that these things are things people aim towards, and that they are incredibly aspirational in nature in that sense. So those are the three questions when defining a community membership identity. And what's incredibly valuable here is, if you, as a community manager, if you can work this out and sit down and think about these for a while, and I'm happy to even talk about it with you after this sometime. You can find me on Twitter and share it with me, and we can talk through it. I'm happy to do that. If you can think about this kind of stuff for a while and think about the answers to these questions, what they mean for your community, you can create a community that is targeted at a certain, I would say type of person, but a person in a certain sphere of life, and you can really make your community incredibly valuable to that person and those people. Because like I said, if you make your community for everyone, you say, oh, this is open to everyone, I want everyone to be a part of it, I don't want to exclude anyone, because that sounds really negative. It's actually not. Defining your community for a certain type of person is incredibly empowering and provides a huge amount of value for everyone who's a part of your community. You don't need to try and be all things to all people. You can be who your community is to everyone else, to the people who find value in it, basically. I'm seeing if there's any other answers put in here. There's one for an education community here. I don't know what the community is called, but in what do I believe? I'm a leader in education. I believe that all children deserve access to opportunities to fulfill their potential. I think that's great. It's great to see. That's an incredibly good thing to aspire to. I assume this is a community for some sort of child education empowerment. I don't know the specifics, of course, but I think that's a very good belief statement of what you expect people to believe when they are a part of your community. I think that's great. So, like I said, make those aspirational, but also make them achievable, because you don't want something that people can never get to, because then it's gonna fall flat. People aren't going to be able to actually take part in your community, because they'll constantly feel like they're failing at it and they're not doing well. Yeah, so that is that. If anyone, those are the kind of the main questions I want to go through. If anyone else has any of theirs they want to share, then drop them in the chat. I can have a quick look at them. We can talk about them now. But yeah, that's kind of the main things I wanted to go through there. What I did want to mention is it's more of a recommendation. A lot of the sort of framework I'm working through here, originally I've adapted it a bit from a book that I'm sure many of you have read or at least heard of, called The Art of Community by Charles H. Vogel. It's an incredible book. That's what it looks like there. And I sort of adapted this framework from there, and I found it a very valuable way of looking at community, and I found it very helpful to define those things for the WordPress community. And I've since worked this workshop with other people in person to sort of go through helping them define it, and it's been incredibly useful. I would really recommend reading that book, not just for this framework, which is a small part of it, but just for everything in that book. There's a huge amount of value there for so many people running communities. So yeah, I think that's great. Someone asked if I could just repeat the first two questions, but there we go. Thank you. Someone shared the doc there. The questions are in there. If you're looking for what the questions are, just have a look at that doc. It's all in there. And yeah, I think that's really valuable. Have a look at that book. There's so much goodness in there. It's not even a very long book, to be honest. It's a really easy read, but it's incredibly deep and incredibly powerful, and made a huge difference to how I view community. And not just within the context of this framework, because like I said, that's a small part of it. So that's really what defining a community membership identity is all about. It's defining your values as a community, who you are, or who your community tells members they are, what your community tells members they should do, and then also what does your community tell members they should believe. Those are really things we're looking at. That worksheet, I will leave that there. You're welcome to make a copy of that yourself at any time. And like I said, I will put this up on my website tomorrow sometime with these links and stuff, and so you can always jump back and have it there. And for that reference, my website is coming up shortly. There. You can find me on Twitter at @Lashbrooke, website Hugh.blog, and Automatics company I work at. I see there's a few questions in here, but I'm going to invite Jamie back in to help out with the Q&A side of things. I'm very happy to answer some questions because we have a bit more time here. So Jamie, if you could, you could jump back in.
Thanks.
Hello. Hey. Yeah.
Good stuff. I'll let you take a drink of water. Really yeah, there's been lots of chat there. We definitely saw a bit of question which was focused around how do you recommend defining multiple identities if the community audience is very large with people with different goals? And there's a few people that come at that from slightly different angles.
Yeah, it's a good question. In the examples I gave, I used the WordPress community as an example, and like I said, there are sort of two sides to that. There's the user side and the contributor side, and that's essentially a community with two different types of people. There's obviously a lot of overlap there, but two different types of people with two different goals and two different sets of things they want to get out of the community. But I'd recommend, if you do have a community with lots of different aspects to it, where there's 2 or 3 or 4 or more sort of types of people you're trying to target, I would consider either trying to refine that a bit further, so you maybe don't have as many types of people you're trying to target, because diluting it like that can, not always, but it can make it harder for you to really create value for the people who are a part of your community. But if you can't do that, and it is important that you keep this sort of varied, I would say user base, varied sort of group of members, and then that's great. And I would say try and define your community, try and define your answers to these questions and your membership identity more broadly, with sort of specific, more sort of specific sub answers to that. So have a sort of very broad community identity that encompasses everyone, and have more sort of specific things that target individual groups within that. Much like I did in the WordPress community example, where there were 2 types, have sort of multiple things going on at once. Does that answer the question there?
Yeah, so, and I think there's a bit of a follow-on, which maybe it doesn't change it much, but do you think the community identities vary if it's a global community, or is it going to be a common purpose no matter geographically if it's really spread?
I guess that depends on what community it is. For example, the WordPress community is a global community. It's spread all over the world. Pretty much every single country, as far as I can tell. These sort of base things that we believe about the community and how we want people to act within the community, that all applies no matter where you are in the world. Some things might be more difficult to apply, I suppose, depending on the context and where someone is in the world, but all of these things apply across the board. So yeah, that question's quite difficult to answer in that sense, just because it very much depends on what kind of things your community is doing. Yeah.
Cool. One thing that came up quite early on when you were talking was around this question of what does the community value? And I think people were asking for a bit of clarification around what do you mean by what do you value? And is that a question that the community is answering, or are you kind of setting that up for the community?
Yeah, it's a good question. And sorry for not explaining that a little bit more. But when it comes to community value, I'm talking about the things that you find important in your community, the things that are important to who you are. So like I said, with WordPress community, things that are important are being able to publish your ideas, being able to value your opinions, being able to contribute back to open source. Open source in general is valuable. Creating an accessible and inclusive community. All of those things are values for the WordPress community. I would say there should be things that you define as a community manager. I would say the things you should define up front for your community, and that very much goes for all of these questions. You should be able to, you should define these things yourself, sort of on behalf of your community, because as the person sort of managing or building community, you know these answers the best, and you know what's important. But as your community grows and develops, it's important to allow the answers to these things, like what you value and what your answers to these 3 questions are. Allow those to be shaped by your community itself and by the members of your community. Whether you outright ask them and you list these questions and say, tell me what you think, or you sort of ask other questions and just based on your interactions with them. However, if you want to do it more subtly or more outright, that's up to you. But I think up front, it's good if you define these yourself, but over time, allow your community to shape all of this and to shape the identity, because I think that's very important, so people feel part of it and like they are shaping this community to be what it is. At the same time, and this is quite a delicate balance, I guess, allow people to shape that community in that way, but also don't lose sight of what you originally intended the community to be. Because you can sort of allow things to be shaped bit by bit, and over time, you eventually have a very different looking community to what you ever intended. And that could backfire on you essentially. So you got to kind of walk that balance. But in terms of defining community values, I would say simplest definition is things that are important to you as a community and things that you hope people in your community would find value in.
Yeah,
hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think it's interesting. That was going to be what I was going to ask around, was a community that's evolving over time. And you've kind of answered that. You need to, I guess, reassess your answers to those questions over time.
Yeah.
One thing that I'd be interested in is, quite often in communities you end up with, a strong subset of smaller number of people, kind of your super users potentially, and that might be a formal program or not. Do you got any other feedback around answering these questions when you've got a very strong, maybe smaller group?
So sort of strong, smaller group within the broader community, you mean?
Yeah, you tend to get a smaller number of very active, very noisy people. And they, I guess, they may support or may not support some of those goals and values that you've put down.
Yeah. I guess it depends how you are, it depends what they're sort of pushing against. Like if they're not supporting stuff and they're kind of trying to turn your community into something that it isn't, then that's something you probably don't want to happen, really, because you have a sort of goal for what your community is supposed to be and what you're expecting it to be. But I think that as a community manager, it'd be up to you to ascertain that value. Are they kind of pushing the community somewhere where you don't really want it to go? Because while your community belongs to everyone, you still are the person guiding it, and you are building this community, and you really know, I mean, without sounding too up on a high horse and everything, but you sort of know best for the community in a lot of ways as a community manager. And it's okay to say that, and it's okay to do that, and it's okay to say, I actually know what's better here, and these guys are wrong. But the other side of course, is they could have a lot of value that they're offering, and maybe they're encouraging you to think in a way that you hadn't thought about your community before, and will help expand the value that you offer. So I guess as a community manager, using that group you mentioned as example, super users or whatever the group is, sort of ascertaining if they're providing value or if they're sort of taking value away from the community.
Yeah. So if you've got criteria around, kind of how you participate, then you can use that to manage, I guess, those noisy participants.
Yeah.
Okay, looking at a couple of the questions here. If you know who your membership identity are, how do you know what kind of value you can create for them?
Cool. Yeah. If you know what your community membership identity is, how do you know what kind of value you can create? Once your community membership identity is defined, you can use that to create that kind of value. So, I mean, take the WordPress thing, for example. The example of, I believe that, sorry, I've forgotten how I phrased it now. Let me jump back in the slides quickly. I believe my ideas are valuable and it's worth taking time to publish them. If that's what I believe is valuable, then when it comes to building the community, I can build that into the community by, on one hand, making sure the software is easy to use for people to write and for people to publish, because giving them the tools to work within the community, because that's an important part of it. Obviously, not all communities are software-based like that, of course, but there'll be one side of it there. Providing training or tools for people to learn how to write better, something you can offer to your community. Obviously, these things sort of scale depending on the size of your community. It's easier or harder depending on the size and scope of your community. But basically, the point really is that once you know what your membership identity is, you can put systems and tools and software or whatever it is in place to help people grow within that. And create that value for them. So you'll have to put in a bit of work to start creating that value. But once you know what you're aiming at, you can do that more effectively.
Yeah, and that's a good question there from Amin. How are the rules different when you were just starting? Is it an easier point at the beginning?
In one sense, it's easier, I guess. It's easier in the sense that you don't have a whole group of people that you are trying to serve. And like, if you want to define all of this stuff with an existing community, they're going to say you've got a community of 1,000 people, and you start defining this kind of thing. You're going to have 1,000 people, or a portion of that at least, having some kind of input or say in all of this kind of stuff, and it'll be difficult to not. If you sort of are able to do this when you're just starting out, you have much more flexibility, and you're able to do this yourself without having to worry too much about people getting upset with you defining things in a way that they don't like, because ultimately you're defining the community for what you think it should be. But like I said, it's not a bad thing to say that as a community manager, you know what's best. That's often a very good thing to be able to say. So being able to sort of, if people are discussing this kind of thing in an existing community when you're trying to define it, if you can just step in and say, actually, say it tactfully, but you're wrong, I'm right, this is what we're doing. Say it nicely though, and frame it in a more helpful way than that. But being able to say that isn't necessarily a bad thing as a community manager, as a leader of the community, to be able to lead your community in that way.
Yeah, I think probably some people might shy away from doing it in an existing community, but actually taking that step might make your life a whole lot easier as a community manager if you've got some some clear purpose, rather than maybe trying to open it up to everybody.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, I'm not sure we've got any other questions. So Hugh has put his contact details up there. As he says, he's really happy to review your answers to these questions and to make use of his template. I definitely will be as well. So we'll all be in touch, I think, with you, Hugh. Thanks very much for your time, or nighttime it is for you.
No, that's all good. Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure. Find me on Twitter, follow my blog. I'll post some info about this on my blog in the next day or so. So you can follow up more there, and ping me on Twitter, and we can, someone just asked if the slides are going to be available. I will put them up on my blog tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Hugh.